Hey everybody, I just finished watching Elton John's Farewell from Dodger Stadium live show on Disney+. If you're looking for any footage of that event, I do not have it here. I just finished watching it about 2 minutes ago, and I'm going to try to upload basically as quickly as possible my thoughts while watching it. I took lots of notes during it. It was a really, really cool event that I've been looking forward to for quite some time. Of course, it is Elton John's last show. It's his last U.S. show. So, this is the way they kept phrasing it during the pre-show, particularly. It was always phrased as the last U.S. show ever on his farewell tour. Which is some interesting language there. So he does have dates booked through July, let me double check here, July 8th of this coming year, 2023, in Stockholm is the last scheduled show he has. I think the thought is that that is supposed to be his last show of all time. And so I suppose rather than actually document the last show of the tour for a live stream big retirement event, they chose just the biggest show of the tour probably, which was strategically placed as the last show of the American run of dates at Dodger Stadium, where he of course did the famous 1975 shows in the Dodger Stadium outfit with all the iconic photos taken from that event. But that language is interesting to me. Sounds like they're trying really hard to be able to weasel themselves out of that statement if it doesn't wind up being his last U.S. show. The last U.S. show ever on his farewell tour. And they were careful to word it that way multiple different times during the pre-show. And the pre-show was actually pretty cool. I decided to sit down and watch it. I had interviews with lots of celebrities, little snippets talking about what Elton John meant, and there were a couple of really amazing people I never would have imagined to see in there talking about Elton, including Quincy Jones was the very first one right off the bat. You don't see a lot of interviews of Quincy Jones anymore. I believe, to my knowledge, and I'm not an expert, I believe he's mostly retired. He is 89. I just looked it up. He's going to turn 90, and doesn't do public appearances for anything. And then they had Joni Mitchell as well. Joni Mitchell just did a show at, I wish I could remember the festival right now. I didn't, can't think of what it was right now, but she just did her first singing performance in a long, long time, of course. She's had a lot of health problems these last few years, and to see her was amazing, but all of it was topped. So the president and his wife was there, Joe and Jill Biden were there, and that for me was still topped by Tony Bennett. So Tony Bennett, it's always amazing. He never goes away, hey? He's 95 years old now, and there have been so many times, right, where we've seen him and we thought, like, oh, this is probably going to be the last time we ever get a chance to see Tony Bennett. It had come out that he is suffering from Alzheimer's, which has forced him to cancel his touring. Well, actually, what's really focused him to cancel his touring plans for the future is just his ill health in general. But because he's proven on a couple of different occasions, including his recent, I forget what the official title was, but he did a concert at Radio City Music Hall with Lady Gaga. I think it was like one night together, one last night, something like that, where to celebrate his 95th birthday, they did a finale performance, and he's still able to get through his entire set, no problem. He's still able to sing his set, but those were advertised as his last shows ever. They weren't advertised as such. He had a couple of dates scheduled for after that wound up getting canceled under doctor's orders, and I never thought I'd hear from him again, and it would appear that this is a new interview for this project. I'm thinking maybe he's had his 96th birthday actually since. In any case, it's amazing that he's still around, and it's great to see anything from him again. Anyway, I'm still talking about the pre-show and I'm 4 minutes in. I gotta get going. But so many cool things happened during that pre-show, including the announcements of the special guests that were going to be performing at this concert, and they did it very tastefully. I was wondering how this would be. I was wondering if there'd be like a long list of celebrities, but the ones that they chose were ones that were relevant to Elton's career, particularly Dua Lipa, who they have a song, of course, together. Probably pronounced that wrong. Can you tell that modern music's not my specialty? It's all the old 60s and 70s stuff, but they had Dua Lipa, I think is how you actually pronounce it, with him. Of course, they would do Cold Heart during the show. Massive hit for the two of them over this past year. And, of course, Kiki D was with him, and they did. We knew from the second they announced Kiki D was going to be here that would mean one little amendment to the set list, and that they would definitely do Don't Go Breaking My Heart, and they did, and it was great. They announced that Bernie Taupin would be there, and he was. And of course, Brandi Carlile. I love Brandi Carlile, and that performance was great too. They had a little interview with him in which he mentions that he's 76 years old, which is interesting because he's not. All the research that I've done indicates that he's 75. Maybe he means he's going to be 76 at the end of touring this coming summer. I'm not sure, but I thought that was interesting. I had to look that up. I'm like, I don't think you're 76 yet. They announced during the pre-show a new documentary that's apparently going to come out called Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Filmed, I think, throughout this tour. I don't know if it's a documentary about his whole career touring or if just this tour specifically. But in any case, that's cool. More upcoming content. I wonder if that'll be... if it's being advertised during this, that makes me think it'll be a Disney Plus exclusive as well. Lots of, interview segments during this 20-minute pre-show. And then it goes into the show itself. Oh, one interesting statement he also made during that pre-show was that they asked him what he's gonna, how he's gonna feel about retirement. He says, "I'm gonna have no problems leaving the road. There's nothing I'm gonna regret about this decision. I'm gonna spend the rest of the time with the family." And that's what people say, hey, when someone goes on a big farewell tour like this that's 3 years long, you often hear, yeah, well, then this tour is going to end and you're going to decide that you're not going to really want to be retired. I think Elton's done it a couple times, and there were some of the interviews here where celebrities were making comments like, I don't really believe that this is your last show and this is your last tour, but sure. He and lots of people of his generation have been known to do kind of farewell tour after farewell tour. But in any case, people have wondered if he's ever going to retire, but he seems to... This seems to be a pretty final statement. He's like, I'm not going to regret anything about this. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and I'm going to retire. Now, right off the bat, once we get into the actual show segment, I'm immediately noticing how beautiful and cinematic all the shots are, and I'm like, how did they put this all together for a live show, for something that we're seeing as it's being recorded, and then they put a disclaimer up right as I'm thinking that says portions previously recorded. Now that was interesting to me. Definitely the whole show, parts of the show were definitely live, but I guess in certain circumstances they would edit in footage from, I'm guessing, footage from the previous Dodger Stadium show. This was a multi-night run for Elton, so I'm assuming they filmed the earlier shows as well. I actually even went into YouTube and I looked up some performance footage from those earlier shows, because I wanted to double check one thing. Elton is known for wearing various different sequin suits, and it's always different at his different shows, and he's definitely wearing the same suit for these segments, the same suits in each segment for all of the Dodger Stadium shows, and I wonder if that's so they can't strategically edit between the live show we were watching and some probably pre-checked and pre-tested footage from the earlier shows. And I'm wondering if that also gives them an out for, if something goes wrong with the stream, they can just flip back to, one of the previous already taped shows. No idea. I don't assume that's what happened. In fact, I know it's not what happened because we had some special guests that, to my knowledge, were from this night only. So, the set list was mostly the same as what he's been playing in the last leg of this farewell tour. The farewell tour has been ongoing since 2018. He's been playing mostly the same set with a couple changes. It opens with Benny and the Jets, goes into Philadelphia Freedom. Now, during Philadelphia Freedom, I noticed a couple of imperfections with the camera feed, and the only reason I point that out at all was to show that some of it must have been live. If there were any imperfections with some cameras, if it were actually all previously filmed, then they would have been able to edit all that out. I thought that was interesting because through Benny and the Jets, everything was so perfectly polished. It looked like an already edited Blu-ray release that I was like, is any of this even live or is it from a previous show? But once you get into, I guess, Philadelphia Freedom, you can tell from certain shots that at least big portions of this, I'd say the majority of it, were probably actually from the live show tonight. And I noticed also, whenever there were some imperfections, some debris on the camera feed, or a camera would freeze up, it would always switch to another camera that was perfect with no problems. I wonder if that's because there was an issue with an individual camera, or if the fact that I'm guessing filmed the previous shows as well, gave them ability to switch back to that whenever you had any problems with anything. That happened a few different times during this, and I wonder if there's somebody in a booth somewhere going, because this happens with live streams, right? There's been a lot, especially since COVID, where there'll be certain little, not interruptions, but certain imperfections with the way it's being shown to you over time, and I wonder if by filming some previous shows they were able to get around that in a really creative and unique way. I'm not saying any of this to be like, oh, this wasn't really live. I think it's genuinely fascinating how they put together a really amazing program for us all to watch. It was really very special. After Philadelphia Freedom, he does, I guess that's why they call it the blues. I made a note that seemed very live. There's also certain acts of his era, of the 60s and 70s era, who nowadays during their performance are feeding in some taped tracks. Elton, to my ears, is not doing that at all. After, I guess that's why they call it the blues, he does Border Song, where he tells the story of his first LA show at the Troubadour. It's very fitting that this last show in America is taking place at Dodger Stadium, because his first show in America was in LA at the Troubadour, and his famous show at the stadium, I think it was a couple of shows at Dodger Stadium in 1975, he said. So really a special place to have this show, and talks about, of course, Aretha Franklin covering that song when it was very new, and how much that meant to him. And they play Border Song. Even though Elton has a million hits, he does have time for some lesser hits, maybe smaller songs in terms of public overplayment, really. We've heard so many of his songs on the radio a million times that it's cool to hear a couple of songs that are more album tracks is what I'm looking for here. But I love Border Song, of course. After that, into one of the big hits, Tiny Dancer. And it's here that I wrote that they really like that stadium drone shot that starts behind the Dodgers logo that faces outside the stadium. The Dodger logo, the Dodger Stadium, sorry. Or is it just LA Dodgers logo? I forget. But they go over the logo and up over the crowd. That was the second or third time they used that exact shot, and I pointed out a few times that they just kept using that shot. It's a beautiful shot, and it looks awesome, but they did use that same shot about 6 or 7 times, which I thought was funny. Then they do have Mercy on the Criminal with Davy Johnson's amazing guitar parts. It's so cool to see his original band, mostly his original band, still with him, particularly, of course, Nigel Olsson, one of his original trio members, and then Davey, who's the band leader, who's been around since, I think, 1971-72 with the band. And Ray Cooper, of course, on percussion. So many legends. I just forgot how good that song was. Have Mercy on the Criminal is a good song, and I often forget about it. After that, into Rocket Man. After Rocket Man, they showed the portions previously recorded sign one more time. Thought it was weird to see that twice. And I was trying to think, does the portions previously recorded sign coming up again mean we're going into a pre-recorded portion? I'm not sure. I don't think so. But in any case, maybe I missed it, but I only saw it come up twice. Anyway, and it seems weird to have it right at the top of the show and then just kind of slotted in between Rocket Man and Take Me to the Pilot, which was the next song. Another great song from his back catalog of album tracks, Take Me to the Pilot. And then from there he does Someone Saved My Life Tonight. Again, this is all the same as his typical set. Someone Saved My Life Tonight has one of the coolest moments at any modern Elton John show, where he says, whenever he always puts particular emphasis on the line, "Thank God my music's still alive," and the audience gets a big kick out of that. I saw Elton most recently in Vancouver in 2019 on this tour, and that always gives you chills, that moment. Then he does his really long version of Leave On. Rocket Man and Leave On have really long extended jams added onto them, which is super fun when you're there live, just the band having fun. And I noticed there was a really polished shot with Davey and Elton on top of his, because Davey kind of joins Elton up on his sort of piano stoop up on stage, and there was one really amazing shot that there was these shots here and there that I wonder if they did edit back in from having been perfected from previous shows. I don't know, but it looked really, really cool either way. And then the first set, sort of his set list for this tour and for this show ends with the song Candle in the Wind. And then, of course, there's like a mini intermission. I don't know if you can even call it an intermission. Sometimes I've seen the show set list as being written as having two separate sets. They don't really. There's just a small intermission where Elton leaves the stage while you hear like the thunder effects from the beginning of Funeral for a Friend, Love Lies Bleeding, and then the beginning of the instrumental part of Funeral for a Friend. And that's what begins the second half of the show. Now, Funeral for a Friend / Love Lies Bleeding is, for some reason, it has always been my favorite Elton John track of all time. It's one of those songs, I know it's a cliche, but it's one of those, I remember exactly where I was the first time I listened to it. I remember getting a copy of the Goodbye Yellow Brick Road album from a local library and putting it in my truck and barely being able to get through the whole album because I was so focused on replaying Love Lies Bleeding like 7 times. I don't know why, but that song has always been just my favorite, so it's always cool to see that live one more time. Then we get into a few more of Elton's sort of album tracks. I'm not actually sure. Some of these were probably singles. I'm probably not being totally accurate in calling them album tracks, but I just mean songs that if you were to make like a greatest hits of Elton John definitive songs would maybe be outside that, but it's really cool to see him playing live. And he does a few sort of in a row here in Burn Down the Mission. Sad songs say so much, and sorry seems to be the hardest word. I know I'm going to get comments down there that say, what are you talking about? Those songs are huge hits, and they are. But in the scope of Elton John's huge, mega, culturally relevant forever songs, it's like there's the A tier, and then it feels wrong calling them the B tier, but because they're amazing, great songs that I love, but you guys know what I mean. Anyway, after sorry seems to be the hardest word, you get to Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, and before that there's a really special band intro that he does, where he doesn't just introduce all the wonderful members of his current band, which includes members of his band since the 70s, the ones that I mentioned earlier, but of course he also does a little bit of a tribute to those band members that he's lost over the years, and he talks about Dee Murray, of course, one of his original trio members. The original Elton John trio in like 1969, 1970 was Elton with Nigel Olsson, of course, still the drummer in his band, and Dee Murray, who has since passed away. And then he also gives tribute to Roger Pope, Guy Babylon, and Bob Birch, who have since passed away. But yeah, then he intros his band. When he intros Ray Cooper, he talks about him as one of the coolest people that he's ever met, and the whole audience gave a really good Coop chant for him. I thought that was fun. And then for that song, Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, that's when we get our first special guest. Towards the end of the show here, the first special guest comes out, and it's Brandi Carlile, and their duet of this song was really special, actually. Brandi Carlile was wearing a similar suit to the famous Dodger Stadium outfit that Elton wore in 75, and I'll get back to that outfit. He will get back to that outfit, rather, before the end of this performance. But those two did such a great job. I feel like that's one of the clips that's going to be sort of viral on YouTube tomorrow morning. I love everything Brandi Carlile does, and to see them together was very special. After that, we get into The Bitch Is Back, and speaking of lines that Elton really likes to give emphasis to in certain songs, the one that he always does on this one is you always see him give special emphasis to when he talks about I'm stone cold sober. As a matter of fact, he mentioned during the interview beforehand, and it's just kind of common knowledge that he's been sober for the last 32 years, and congratulations to him. And speaking of things that he likes to emphasize, the next song is I'm Still Standing. And that one, I mentioned that there's certain lines he likes to emphasize in certain songs. That whole song is one of those. It's so celebratory that here at 75 years old, and like 50 years after most of his biggest hits of the early 70s were released, he's still out there, and I'm Still Standing is a great testament to that. And after that, we get the big change in the set list that we haven't seen him do in a long time. The song Don't Go Breaking My Heart, because of course Kiki D was in town. I didn't actually see that one coming. It was very cool to see her come out. I don't know much about Kiki D. I don't know if she's still regularly performing, but in terms of from a pop culture standpoint, I feel like I hadn't seen her in a long time, and that was so. I feel like I've used the word special 17 times, but there were some really, really cool moments, and that was one of the ones that gives you goosebumps, for sure. Then they did Crocodile Rock. I noticed another drone shot again in there. They used that drone shot over the logo one more time. And then they end the main set with Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting. The regular end song to the main set of the stage, of the show, excuse me. They had fireworks to mark the occasion. I'm not sure if that was just something he's been doing at every outdoor show, but it was really, really cool to see. Then there's the encore break. That's the end of the main set. And for the encore, he comes out in his special Dodger Stadium outfit. Not exactly like what he wore in 1975. It's a lot more sequined than it was in those days, but a super cool nod to a commemoration of an amazing pop culture moment in time, moment in rock and roll history. And in that outfit, he starts the sort of encore mini set with the song Cold Heart, his big hit with Dua Lipa last year. So his set list hasn't changed much since the beginning of the Goodbye Yellow Brick Road tour in 2018, but I think it's really cool that during the course of his last tour ever, he's had, like he said, another number one hit around the world. I didn't double check his research. I'll take Elton's word for it that it's a number one song around the world. I have heard it all over the radio, for sure. And he has another huge, culturally relevant, massive hit song. So another tune to add to the set list and to add to his already staggering catalog of tracks. And it was cool to see Dua Lipa come out and do that one with him. After that, he does his first ever hit, as he mentioned, 52 years ago. Hard to believe it's been that long. Your Song, in which they do another drone shot over the logo. Again, did it about 6 or 7 times. I just thought it was funny to point out whenever that would happen. And then after that song, he does a big thanks to his crew, who of course have been pretty much, I think, the same crew probably that's been around since at least 2018 when this tour started. He talks about how they've been all in a bubble, trying to stay as safe as possible ever since COVID has started. And that's the moment when he introduces the legendary lyricist Bernie Taupin, or is it Taupin? Sorry, again, there's a few names here that I've probably pronounced wrong. But whenever you hear Elton John songs, Elton's of course the first person you think of, and I often have to remind myself that the lyrics are not his, that Bernie wrote all of those amazing words that we've all memorized to all of these songs, and he did a big bow, and that was, the audience was clearly really taken aback to see him. And then David Furnish, his husband, Elton's husband, and Elton's 3 children come out as sort of a reminder to what he's leaving the road for. Again, he is touring through at least July, but that's the reason he wants to retire. Of course, as anyone would want to, he wants to spend time with David and his 3 children, and they came out there on stage to live this moment with him. And then the show ends with Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. I noticed in Goodbye Yellow Brick Road he sang the lyric "Haunted Old Owl in the Street." The line is, of course, "Haunted Old Owl in the Woods." The only reason I point that out again is to be like, that seems like it must be live then. At least what we must have been hearing there was live, or else they would have corrected that lyrical mistake. Unless that's just a fun thing, like a change-up he does live. I don't know. I haven't studied all the footage of all the shows from this tour. But that ended the show. And so he did 24 songs in total. But again, he likes to do some extended versions of his songs when he plays live. So the whole show is, what is it, just under 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours, something like that. I've seen a lot of bands live, like over 100, maybe over 200 now at this point. And Elton was probably the third longest show I've ever seen. I think Paul McCartney and Stevie Wonder, when I saw them, did longer shows. But Elton's is staggeringly long, and what's amazing about his shows is that he's doing like 200 of these every year still to this day. Now, in theory, this coming year, 2023, is going to be the last time he ever does a large amount of touring dates. We'll see if he ever comes back again, who knows. But for now, this is it, and that was the last time he'll ever perform in North America. And it was really cool by Disney Plus to put this together. And however it was they made it, however it was they put it together, I couldn't tell exactly. But however it was they did it, they did an amazing job, and I was so glad to be able to see this moment in Elton John's career history live when it happened. Really glad I got the opportunity to see it. Let me know in the comments what you guys thought of it. It is now 11:30 at night, so I'm going to stop recording myself now. If you've actually made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you with another video again real soon. Really enjoyed that today.